welcome everyone to another episode of Deepen with Christina. I'm your host, Christina Weber, and I am in the cabin of a yacht here in Marina del Rey. I am a guest in this lovely 5-bedroom yacht with a hot tub on the roof. It's been a fun experience as I integrate back from Unleash. That is the 3-day transformational journey that I participate in off the grid in Sacramento. And I am inviting you in now to a conversation with somebody who I knew of before Unleash. I had seen him in social settings. I also, when I see couples, like when I see two beautiful people who are just seem to be grounded in their coupledom, and that's what I saw in this particular human, him and his significant other. And my curiosity has been like, who is that human being? And we got to be at Unleash together. Yossef Sagi. Did I say that? Yes. Sagi. Yossef Sagi. He was at Unleash too. And he was part of a facilitator. He was one of the guides to journey us through that experience together. And Yossef has a fascinating background. I'm actually going to start there because I think as you get to observe and listen to this conversation, as him and I get to better know each other, that it's important, I think, to understand where he's come from, because it's fascinating, it's significant, and his childhood for 25 years was rooted in Kabbalah, which is something that I studied in New York City from, I guess, 30 to 32. I was really involved in, I was going to Kabbalah. I did Kabbalah level 1, 2, and 3 multiple times. If you're listening, you may know about Feminine Weapon, which is a women's empowerment organization that I founded in 2012 while I was studying Kabbalah. And our first event was an intro to Kabbalah. I was like, everybody needs to hear this wisdom. It was the first time that I felt like I had had a new perspective on life. One of those perspectives being that everything we desire is outside of our comfort zone, and I needed to move through the challenges and step into the hardships of life to really, I hate to use the word achieve, to experience the things I wanted to experience, I'll say. So I'm so grateful that you have joined me on the boat and that we got to have an experience together at Unleash. I'm
really grateful too. And first of all, we got to sit down at Unleash and really get to know each other. You've been in my orbit for a while. I know that you know Natalie, my partner, and a lot of my friends, and I've seen you at events here and there. And so it was nice to just sit down at a picnic table at Unleash and get to know each other. And now I'm excited to get to know you even better. So just really looking forward to deepening with you.
Deepening, yes. So you mentioned at that picnic table that you, I think at age 10 or so, your parents split.
My parents got divorced when I was 8. By the time I was 10, my mother was remarried and she joined the Kabbalah Center at that time. And so being a 10-year-old and I was, split time between my mom and my dad until my dad left the country when I was 12. So I basically sort of got dragged along into this organization as a kid. Not really knowing what I was getting myself into. I was born Jewish, but we were never practicing. We were like cheeseburgers and Yom Kippur Jews. With strong Israeli background as well. So that was more my culture, and we were very secular. And so coming into the Kabbalah Center, which was, it felt like, especially at the time, like there was a lot of the Jewish stuff, except they didn't use the J word. So we had all the practices and the holidays and all those things, but also sort of like a deeper esoteric study of the wisdom behind, the scriptures.
And where did you grow up?
Toronto.
Okay, so when you then at 10 years old, and you kind of say that Kabbalah for you turned into a cult. I didn't have that experience, but for you, it became that experience. In the beginning, cults are very attractive.
That's right. We live in Los Angeles. It's the cult capital of the world. There's more cults here than anywhere else. And cult is it's a word, and it can be sort of like scary to say, like, oh, you're labeling this a cult. There are certain boxes that organizations that have cult-like tendencies tend to check. So I'd rather say it's an organization with a lot of cult-like tendencies. I didn't know it at the time.
You're 10 years old.
I'm 10 years old, yeah. I'm 10 years old, and I'm already, I've always been a person who questions, and I've also been a skeptic, as young as I could imagine. So I had the questions, and they didn't have children's classes at the time. I ended up creating children's classes at the Kabbalah Center as I grew up, being a child who grew up there. But at that time, they didn't have children's classes, and so I took adult classes. I remember being 12 and being in adults classes, astrology classes, and stuff like that, that they were teaching at the time. And honestly, the wisdom there was very deep. The wisdom that they shared was very deep, and it is life-changing. And I think that's why people get drawn to these types of organizations. And I think there's value to these types of organizations, because when you're coming from a place where you have no real faith, it can be helpful to have an external place to give you faith. That's why people look for religion, and that's why some people look towards spirituality or cult-like organizations, where people just want to be a part of something that has a bigger meaning, and a community, and a connection to the divine. And all of that is there for you because they created a really great insular community. In fact, they sort of discouraged you from having a lot of connections outside unless it was to bring more people in. I'm also aware that my earlier days at the Kabbalah Center had shifted a lot externally to become, there was always something they tried to do to become more palatable and more mainstream, to reach out to more people. And the reason that's sort of where I got to it after 25 years of being there, even though I saw things earlier. The two main issues that I had, one is a more particular issue of the Kabbalah Center, and the other one is a more general issue of these types of organizations. The particular issues was that they weren't walking the talk. The leadership there's a lot of corruption there in terms of money and sex and other things that happened there in the leadership and in some of the teachers there. And so that was a particular issue of the organization, a lot of things that allegedly happened there. And on a more general issue, and this is really the bigger point here, is that we're all searching for someone else to tell us. We're all looking for someone to tell us, how do I connect to God? How do I connect? How do I become more conscious? And the truth is that you can only get so far like that, and eventually the journey becomes deeply personal. And so, whereas going to the Kabbalah Center or any type of spiritual path, and it's not exclusive to Kabbalah, but any type of spiritual path, you can only go so far. And then the tool that actually helped you to grow becomes the one that holds you back.
I remember before we push record on this podcast, you mentioned that term, spiritual sovereignty, or being spiritual sovereign. And I, because of my experience with Kabbalah, I was surface level within the organization. I never really deeply rooted my being and my existence. They weren't all my friends were there. Most of my friends were actually outside of there. So I would tap in, learn the wisdom. It enhanced my life, but then I would go on. And I think I've looked at, like, when you say that word spiritually sovereign, it's like you get to go out in the world and create your own curriculum. Yes, tap into Kabbalah. Yes, tap into Buddhism. Yes, tap into different meditation practices or plant medicines, so it's like choose your own adventure and your own journey, and then trust your own internal guidance that the right people will come to you at the right time to up-level you. And maybe, this is also a practice in non-attachment, because we, even in our curriculums, we go to them to kind of to solve everything. And this is going to be my one holy grail guidance. And that's then, as you said, it starts to shrink you, and it's holding you back from choosing your own adventure, because I heard somebody say a quote recently, and they had said, like, if you can see the path ahead of you, it's probably not your path. And it's if I can see somebody else has done what I want to do, and I think that that's what I want to do, it's probably not real, because we all have a different fingerprint that we're meant to live, and nobody can show you how to do it. You just have to open up your door and like go outside and see the world and connect and adventure.
That's right. The Beatles impersonators don't become the Beatles, right? You need to carve your own path. And you can think of all these things as a school. You go to art school because you want to learn the rules of light and shadow and color blending and perspective and all those different things. But if you want to become a unique artist, then you need to break all those rules. You become a cubist, like Picasso, or you become a Jackson Pollock, or someone, or Frida, someone who like breaks all the rules, and you make your own style. That's what sets you apart. And it's the same with music, and it's the same with business. It's always, you've got to break the mold to stand out. And for whatever reason, in spirituality, we've been told to follow a path. No one has been enlightened as enlightened in the Buddhist path as Buddha, and no one has been as enlightened in Christianity as Jesus. You're never going to get to the level of the person who started a path. So you can get to be the highest on your own. You get to achieve enlightenment on your own. So I think we learn to a certain degree from what people teach, but we learn more from how they're being. And what all these people did is went out and challenged everything and carved their own path. And I believe that's the way to spiritual sovereignty.
So you're now in Kabbalah, and the Kabbalah experience to you is cultish because it's been now 25 years. What is this exit like?
Slow. It took a lot of challenging, because I had built a lot of rules for myself, rules that weren't mine, rules that were given to me. And I was a teacher at the Kabbalah Center as well, a volunteer teacher, not one of the full-time teachers, but I volunteered and I taught there. And I remember that I would teach what they allowed me to teach and who they allowed me to teach. And I would learn from who they told me I should learn from. They weren't very encouraging of learning from external sources, especially back then. Or why would you? It wasn't like force, but it's like, why would you? We have everything here. So why would you want to learn anything else? And the truth is, I'm a very curious person. I like learning from other places. For instance, Tantra is something that had always really called me. And I went through a coaching program to become a coach because I had sort of reached a plateau in children's education where I was at. And that program really made me challenge a lot of my beliefs, because to be a good coach, you've got to live to be a pretty sovereign person yourself.
Is this a Kabbalah coaching program?
Unrelated. It was another coaching program. And when I went through it, one of these principles that they were teaching was that everyone you meet is your teacher and your student. And it's this idea of, we get to learn from everyone and we have something to give to everyone. But what it did for me is made me realize that I gave other people permission to tell me who's my teacher and who's my student. Mm. And that's the first thing that sort of got me starting challenging in myself. But it took me 5 more years to leave after that. And there was just ingredient after ingredient of what got me there. Because to leave something like that after 20 to 25 years, it's your community, it's everyone you know.
It's your identity, too.
It's my identity. It's my whole personality. Because, you know, people who join cults when they're adults is very different than people who join cults when they're kids. Because my personality, I didn't develop my own personality psychologically. I just borrowed the cult mentality because I was 10. And then also it's a connection to divine, to God, to something. And we would talk a lot about energy at the Kabbalah Center, but I never had a direct experience of energy. And I had that first experience when I went to learn Tantra, and I felt the energy course through my body. I'm like, oh, that's what energy is. It went from something that was sort of this like mental understanding to an experience in my body, an embodiment of it, a visceral experience. And I was like, wow, there's so much more out there. And eventually that I also felt drawn and led to plant medicine. And I'd never really done drugs besides like smoked marijuana a little bit, but even that, I'd never done anything. And on my first plant medicine journey, I had a direct experience of God, and that was literally the last ingredient I needed, because I was like, okay, I'm willing to let go of my community and start fresh. I'm willing to try and figure out my identity from scratch, but I feel like if I'm going to leave, I'm going to lose my spirituality. I'm going to lose my connection to God, and that scares me. And on that plant journey, when I found the divine inside of me, and I felt so connected to that, I realized that it's always there, and that's the last thing that I needed, and I left right after that, basically. And so it shifted from a faith that depends on something external, even though in Kabbalah they do teach you that you have a divine aspect in you, but there's still like, you know, you need to scan this book and read this text and do these things and make these connections. And here it's like everything is available inside of you. And that was my biggest shift. And I think that's what spiritual sovereignty is all about.
Before we jump over into Tantra, because I do want to speak to how you felt called to Tantra. And I do believe there's a lot of misconceptions of even what Tantra is. And then I'd love to go into some of what I heard you share to the group collectively at Unleash. But before we jump out of Kabbalah, I'd love to just wrap a little bit about what are some of the positive teachings. For me personally, I remember, well, let me share how I got into Kabbalah. So I was living in New York City. I was about between 28 or 30, and I was invited to an intro to Kabbalah, like a free intro at a beautiful apartment. And I went, and there's all these lovely people, and whatever the teacher that spoke, I was like, that's great. And I left thinking, you know, this is wonderful, but I don't have time for this. I just started a new job. I had a boyfriend. I was, you know, New York City is so ambitious. I was like, not for me, but cool. And I left with 2 books, Kabbalah on Love and Kabbalah on Fear. I came home, put them on my mantle, and continued on with my life. 2 years later, that relationship, I had broken up. I had a 5-year relationship from about 25 to 30. We had broken up. I was now in a new relationship, and I was dating one of my best friends. And we were out to dinner one night, and we were arguing on the definition of love, like what love means. And we were not seeing eye to eye on what love is. And I went home that night so frustrated. And there on my mantle was this book, Kabbalah on Love. And I was like, what do these fucking Kabbalah people think about love? And so I opened up the book and I started reading it. And I was like, yes, this is like everything like I feel about love. And I called the friend who had invited me to that first intro to Kabbalah, and I said, okay, what is this? I'm ready. Where do I sign up? And the next week, I was there at Kabbalah Level 1, 10-week course. The friend that I was in relationship with at that moment actually came and joined me in that class. We broke up during it. And then going through that process together, it brought us back to being friends. But it was interesting because I'd go to class every day, or not every day, once a week, and I would be in that room with him. And sometimes I hated him. And there we were studying spirituality together in that room. And from that book, that's where I picked up this, I guess, what I still personally sort of struggle with that I kind of got from Kabbalah. We say, I love the context that about community, that this desire to receive for the sake of sharing. That's part of one of Deepen's values. Guidance is the acronym of values, and the D is desire to receive for the sake of sharing. So that when we're existing in the world and we have these goals or these things that we want to, whether it's a car, this materialistic stuff, like in Kabbalah, it's that it's like you can have your desires, but your desires are to receive for the sake of sharing and not for the self alone. So that felt so in resonance with me. And then they talk about, there's one story in that book particularly, you probably know it well, I think Moses goes in and he's tasked to, create a community, and there's, 500 people in the community, and everybody, when you wake up in the morning, you have everybody is to take care of you. And so you don't necessarily need to worry about yourself. You don't need to, there's somebody in the neighborhood that's like the baker, and someone the cook, and someone who builds houses, and maybe you take care of the kids. And so in that, everybody is taken care of. But when if just one person in that community pulls back, then it all falls apart. And so at times that just so resonated with me. And so then we get on the plane, and there's the plane on the face mask that's like, put your own face mask on first, and then you can help others with their face mask. I've kind of struggled with that a little bit since that teaching, because I'm like, why can't we all be putting the face mask on for each other and supporting each other? And that's kind of like the idea of oneness that I wish to get to. And then also in that love book is where I read, when they talk about soulmates. I'm curious actually even now of studying, because some of my thought processes around soulmates does come from Kabbalah, which is that not everybody will meet their soulmate this lifetime, that you have to do enough work on your own to become the bride person. Doesn't mean that you're not going to have relationships along the way that's going to help you to evolve to the greatest, highest version of yourself. But that God, creator, universe will give you this other person once you have done enough work on yourself, and then you're brought to your soulmate. And I've also heard on the contrary in Kabbalah too, is one of my teachers once said when somebody was talking about, breaking up with their soulmate, and he said, well, take the soul of your soulmate and put it into another person. Also, Kabbalah is, there's a belief in reincarnation, and that we come back lifetimes over and over. And that does resonate with me as well. And then the definition of love in the back of that Kabbalah and Love book, which has always resonated, and if you listen to this podcast, you've probably heard me say this before, is that love is a gradual process of ego elimination and ever increasing acts of sharing. And that to me is just like, yes. Lastly, I will add that now when I say that, that we are all to take care of each other, and I don't have to worry about my needs because everybody else is where's my needs, doesn't mean that like, okay, so I don't have boundaries, and I don't wake up in the morning and say, I got to go for a run before I can feed you, because I know that I'm going to be able to sustain feeding you for longer if I take care of my own self, because I have my own intuitive state that nobody else has or can access besides me. So those are and then the last thing is, it was around, toxic relationships and boundaries. Is I, at the time, when I was studying, was, the chief of staff at a marketing agency in New York City that I learned a lot from. But after, 2 years into there, I looked around the environment and like, this environment is not good for, it's not good for me anymore. I need to move on. And because of studying Kabbalah, I was able to exit it one last thing I learned from Kabbalah, because I did say a couple last things, is that I used to have a huge fear of public speaking. And I was sharing with my teacher at that time, and he said, well, your ego is so big. You're so self-absorbed that you care, and you're hoarding information, and you have to think that you have to be perfect. And so, and when I heard that, like, it's my ego, what? Like, that I have a fear of public speaking, it just, pushed me into realizing that this was a fear and I needed to overcome this fear. And I have wisdom and thoughts and information inside of me that can be shared with the world. And for my own insecurities, I was holding them back.
Yeah, absolutely. I do think a lot of my growth happened there. I also found my voice there. It laid a lot of foundation for everything that was to come. And even on my plant journey, I was told that it was a very important piece of the journey. Anything that is in our journey is an important piece of the journey. Can I ask you a question?
Of course.
So let's take any one of those things that supported you. We can do the soulmates one. This idea that there's a soulmate that there's a person who's perfect for you. You may or may not meet them in this lifetime, and it depends on how much work you do to be able to earn it. How's that belief been serving you?
How has that belief been serving me? Oh, great question. It's something that a belief that I dance with. It does sound so romantic. There is this like one person. Now, I when it comes to perfection, I also have the theory, everything is always perfect. We're perfect in the imperfect, and it's all effervescent, and even in the chaos and the mess. I am not in a relationship in this moment. I am, quote unquote, dating out in the world, although what is dating? I have a desire, I have a longing. I'll say there is a longing to be in that partnership and relationship. And I have faith. And, sometimes I think, and maybe this is holding back, that like, I'm going to be in my hospice bed at 80 or 90, 100 years old and look over and see him beside me and be like, it was you. And then we die.
What has been the cost of you holding on to this belief?
I don't think I don't actually feel as though, I don't feel as though this belief is holding me back.
I didn't say it's holding you back. I said, what's been the cost to believe that there's one person who's meant for you and that you have to do a certain amount of work to earn to be able to be with that person?
I think for me, it's almost like it's curiosity. It's, it's curiosity. I haven't, I've had that 5-year relationship from 25 to 30. And now in my 30s, I have had, relationships, the longest I think was a year. And then there's been, 2 months, 3 months of, and there is that like, do we need to do the work in this relationship together to maintain it? Or is this not the right relationship for me? But I don't feel like that belief I don't feel so attached to the belief. I'm more of curious about the belief. And, I guess in that belief, it does create some type of faith, because I don't think there's one person in this lifetime, maybe in the idea of like multiple lifetimes and how if you run this, that like we all end up, in this puzzle piece of a picture that you just have to know your piece and it comes back together. I mean, it's more of like a curiosity around it.
And this is exactly it. So you have a belief that was told to you and you're not even sure if you believe it. And this is the key to everything. Nothing has any meaning except for the meaning that we give it. And so if you choose for a soulmate to mean a person that you're meant to be with, and then on top of that add a burden of having to do a certain amount of personal work to get there, then you will always feel that if you're alone, you haven't done enough.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah, I haven't felt that way. However, with you and Natalie, do you believe, though, that people are destined or given to you?
So again, this is like what it's all about the belief. So this is actually something that came to me about soulmates. Soulmates do exist. And the good news is that all you need to do is to treat someone as if they're your soulmate.
Yes. I love that. Yeah.
Because nothing has any meaning except for the meaning you give it. If you are with the person you're with and you treat them as if they're your soulmate, they are your soulmate. And that's it. Why would you give any power to anything outside of yourself to dictate who is your soulmate and who is not? And that's, even though I think a lot of the beliefs in Kabbalah are fun and nice, and there's also a distinguish between Kabbalah, which is quite deep and valuable, and the Kabbalah Center, which is an organization. But any path, Kabbalah, Tantra, anything that we'll talk about, is limiting if you give your power to something external to yourself.
I do appreciate that when I did hear that take your soulmate, take the soul of your soulmate and put it into somebody else. And that's essentially what I also heard from you in that moment as well. One thing that I spent a month in Bali a couple years ago, and I've recently turned 40, and so I tend to hang out with people of all generations, and I was hearing a lot of 20-somethings, I'll say, in Bali being like, that's my twin flame and that's my soulmate. And they were like so attached to these also titles of these people that I remember thinking like, oh, when you're 80, come back and tell me who was your soulmate and who was your twin flame. Because there's just so much energy, I believe, that gets put into that.
That's right. It's right. We put too much importance into it. When you put too much importance into anything, into a person being your ideal partner and the only one, a certain path in life being the only one, it's like squeezing onto the soap too tight. It's going to slip. You're not going to be able to hold on to it. And you're also, when you give one thing so much importance, you blind yourself to everything else that's available to you.
When we, let's actually commitments. So there's then in relationship, because I can love anybody. Love to me is so easy. To some people it's a miracle, but for me it's like easy. But relationship is where that's where more work happens. And so when you're a master coach, so this is why I'm asking you this. How do you, what do you suggest when people are getting to know each other and they are exploring a relationship, that how they express or share boundaries and make commitments with one another?
I think before you can explore boundaries and commitments with one another, you need to explore the boundaries, the commitments, the desires you have inside of yourself. Everything starts with self-awareness, and people just run into things and react to their feelings around stuff and their pain and their hurt and their fear and their love and their passion, and then it just starts all spilling out. How much time do we actually spend with ourselves to be present with what's going on? Because when we're present with what's showing up for us, we become clear about what's important to us. And that's the first step. And then you get to communicate it, and communicate honestly. If you're trying to perform or pretend or put on a mask to be the person that your partner will love, that is not sustainable. Eventually, they're going to find out who you really are.
And you see this is happening out in the world.
That's literally all we do all the time. Everybody. And not just in romantic relationships. We're trying to impress other people, or we're trying to give a certain demeanor. Maybe we're hiding our pain with humor. Maybe it's with toughness. Maybe it's playing the victim. But we're always wearing masks, and for the most part, we're not showing our true selves. And what happens is that you have two people with masks fall in love with each other, and then as you live with each other and spend time with each other, you get to see what's behind the mask. You're like, that's not what I signed up for. So when you have a tremendous level of your own awareness and a commitment to yourself to be authentic in every moment, then you can communicate that with the other person of what's important to you, what are your boundaries, what are your desires, and where you're at. And the person gets to choose whether they fall in love with that or not, whether they want to be in a relationship with that or not. And if both people are doing that, then the relationship will be more sustainable.
When we were at Unleash, you opened us off with a talk on consent, and you shared this acronym. What was, say the word, the acronym. I'm pretty sure I remember what each letter is, but there was...
Yeah, so that acronym, it's not mine. It's something that's borrowed, and it's used in a lot of sex-positive spaces, play parties, and stuff like that. It's RDBSM.
RDBSM. So the R is relationship, the B is boundaries, the D is desires, the S is sexual health, and the M is meaning.
Meaning and aftercare.
And then aftercare. Yeah. Is it meaning and aftercare in one?
Yeah.
Okay.
You can add an A to the end if it helps to remember. Yeah. So the thing is, the reason I share this at Unleash is because it's sort of like this guided journey, but plays a lot like a festival. And when people go to festivals and people are unleashing and there's a lot of sexy bodies around, we want to have connections with other people. And the purpose of RDBSM is to do exactly what I spoke about, which is to share authentically where you're at so that both people can be honest and say, can I hold space for this other person within the experience we want to have together? So the R is just a very clear, sort of understanding of what's my relationship status. If I'm single, then I'm single. If I'm in a relationship, is there openness there or isn't there? And I just become very, just to very clearly express that so that, it can be a decision of, do I want to have a interaction with someone who's in this type of relationship or not? Boundaries, right? What's important for me that isn't crossed? And so when you express your boundaries, if the other person says, I can't honor those boundaries, or you can't honor the other person's boundaries, you don't want to do anything with them. Desires, you share your desires. And if you're present with it and you can be really brave to share your desires, because it's hard for us to ask for what we want. And then you can check in with each other. Can I provide for the other person what their desires are? Sexual health, in history, that's just an important one, right? To honor each other and to be really clear of what we've experienced in our sexual history and health, to see if we're comfortable having an interaction with each other. That's on a purely physical, medical health level. And then meaning, that's one of my favorite ones, is what does this mean to me? What does this interaction mean to me? Is this just a fling? Is this a connection? Am I looking for something more? And can I hold that space for the other person? If one person wants a fling and another person wants a deeper connection, that might not align. And so it's important to share that. And aftercare. How do I want to be taken care of after? And, maybe I need to be cuddled for, 30 minutes after having a sexual interaction with someone. And if the other person can't do that for me, right, then that's not the person I want to have an interaction with. Maybe I want to be acknowledged. Maybe I want to make sure that we're connected after and that we keep speaking. Maybe aftercare for me is I actually never want to have contact with you again. I just want to have a one-night stand type situation. So whatever it is, to express what your needs are in that and see if you can meet each other. And if you get to meet each other along all of those different spaces, now you get to have this beautiful, juicy, delicious interaction with someone where you're on the same page and you get to fully explore yourselves within the boundaries and desires and meaning that you set.
All of this sounds awesome. And for the average person who's out in the world, I imagine it to be an edge. You go onto a date, because we do live in the culture of swipe dating apps, or I don't know, people don't necessarily meet each other out in public anymore unless you go to a festival or you go to an event, which I highly recommend that you do that. But the idea of bringing that up, how do you propose that somebody says, hey, and maybe this is the way they do it. I listened to a podcast and I heard this, I don't know if I can say it as fast as you are.
RDBSM.
RDBSM.
Think of BDSM and add an R in the front.
Okay. How do you propose somebody offer that? And when do you, like, what type of relational scenarios do you invite this into, and how soon?
Well, first of all, I'll say that this is something you can do even in non-sexual situations. If you need to sit down and have a conversation and confront someone about something, you might skip the sexual health part, but and the relationship part, but you might do some of the same things. You might say, I want to have a conversation. There's something I think that we really need to talk about. These are my boundaries within the conversation. I don't like being yelled at. I want everyone to be civil. That's very important for me. These are my desires of what I want, and this is what it means to me. And this is the aftercare that I want after our conversation. I want us to go out for ice cream together and feel like we're still friends. And can you hold that for me? And what's important for you? And you can have that. So this is the framework you can use in other places as well. Now, if you're on a date, if it's something that's romantic, if it's something that it feels like you want to have space with someone to explore sexually through touch, it can this layer of creating a safe space. Safety creates expression. This is what happened in an Unleash. Safety allows space for expression. If I don't feel safe, I'm always testing where the edge is. It's like dipping my toe in the pool. It's like, is it safe? Is it safe? Is it safe? And that's all that's in my head. Is it safe? And that's how we go, into our interactions with other people. A lot of the times, like, oh, maybe I'll just try and kiss them, and then let's see if that works. And then you're totally in your head. When you have this conversation, you've taken everything that's in your head and you put it outside. Now you're not in your head. You're in your body and you're in your heart. Now, so it is awkward to have that conversation, but if you are aware of what it does for you to have that conversation, then you're going to always want to have the conversation. You're on a date and a guy turns to you and says, Christina, I am feeling this really strong connection over here. I don't know if you're feeling it too. And I want to explore further what this is all about. I think that there could be something here, and I really want us to both feel safe. So yes, there's this thing that might seem a little bit silly, but it's always created a really powerful bubble for me, and I want this to be meaningful for us. How open are you to exploring that with me?
So powerful. And that does create a sense of safety and trust, because, trust is built through courage. When someone has the courage to say things that are maybe not necessarily shared out in the world, you just automatically feel like a deeper trust. Wow, this person is open, they're honest, they're willing to go deep. Also, when you're sharing that, with WeDeepen, as we build, we're a team of 4 at this moment, 4 that are fully focused on this project. And in this year, we've had 3 college students go through our internship. And first, when I talk about, sex, because they're now joining an organization that is about deepening in all areas of your life, which is included relationship, and in relationship is sex. And, they have shared with me that pretty much that our educational curriculum doesn't give them anything. I had a little sex ed growing up, graduating high school in 1999, but now the younger generation, they're not. So we get to go to these places and create our own curriculums, or to discover kind of how men, women, all human beings are relating to one another. And when you use this acronym, I also think of how to build an organization accessing this type of wisdom. Somebody comes in and they want to work with WeDeepen or support WeDeepen, to walk through and ask them, well, I think relationship too, like it's important that, you know, how they spend their, you know, whether it's not necessarily detailed, but like what relationships are you in that are really important to you. So we as an organization get to know them and we get to support your relationships and those relationships, not only with other human beings that you have, but what relationships that you have with other organizations. Who else are you committed to? Because now, you know, we're not only discovering polyamory in our romantic relationships, but there's polyamory in your business. And then second, with boundaries, you know, as you were speaking of having that difficult conversation. And before we started the podcast, one thing I said is like, how much time do you have? Like even creating that container that you're stepping into that's included in boundaries, and self-discovery and boundaries too, because of, as you mentioned, self-awareness to actually get to these places to share, is I remember having to go through my own experiences and relationships to be like, oh, there's a boundary. There's one. Oh, I didn't even know this was. I thought I was just completely, fully open. You can do anything. But when you set these boundaries, they essentially are the hook for somebody else to discover compatibility. You know, as I'm building my organization, I say, you know, WeDeepen is a requirement, you know, that you must work X amount of hours a week. And that's a boundary for us. So if you can commit to that boundary, then you're in. So organizations to create boundaries is super important as well. Desires. What is the desire of WeDeepen? You know, we aim to support facilitators and guides of transformational brands and programs. And we want that to reach millions and millions of people to catalyze transformation on earth. So it's a big desire that you're stepping into.
And also, what are the specific desires I have from you, employee?
Yes.
Right?
Yeah. What do I need from you? Because I think there is like, we have these job descriptions, and, you know, you want to match the job description with the person in front of them so they feel as though they have wings to fly. And I also, you know, what's got me in, you know, what I've found tension around before in the past is that, you know, there's the job description and then there's also like, but wait, I have these gifts that you don't know and I still want. So also leaving space in the job description for someone to fly to. But I also need a boundary is that what's written here on this paper does need to be attended to. And if you're not going to attend to it, then we need to get somebody else to attend to it. Otherwise, it's coming through you.
And you got to share your boundaries and desires, and they share their boundaries and desires and meaning and everything else. And then you get to take a look and see if it's compatible. And if it's not, you can totally have a conversation also of maybe we can reach compatibility. I'll give a little bit here, you give a little bit there. It's still going to be a fuck yes on both sides, but maybe we can reach something that's still a win-win for everyone. And if it's not, then it's not. And that's fine. There will be someone else.
Let's jump over to Tantra. You know, Tantra to me, I had taken the definition of that to mean presence. When I'm present with someone, that's like a tantric experience. But when I asked you what your definition of Tantra was, it expanded my perspectives of it.
So, from what I've learned about Tantra, the word itself in Sanskrit means web or matrix. And what that implies, it's the interconnectedness of all things, how everything is interconnected. And when you dig deeper and you ask, what is everything interconnected by? The concept in Tantra is called Shakti. Most people think of Shakti as the feminine goddess. It is also the word for power or energy. So everything's connected through this concept of Shakti, this feminine energy, and specifically this creative energy, which is a sexual energy. And so the fabric of the matrix, of the web, of the universe, according to Tantra, is pure sexual energy. That's what Shakti is. And so when people say, oh, Tantra's all about sex, yes and no. It's all about sex because it's all about sexual energy. It does, but about only 10 to 15% of Tantra actually talks about the way we would think of sex in terms of like intercourse. But yes, everything is sex according to Tantra.
We come from sex.
we come from sex. That's how we were created. And from a tantric perspective, the universe was created through sex, through the divine union of the masculine and the feminine as concepts, as archetypes, the Shakti, which is the feminine, which is the energy, and the masculine, the Shiva, which is consciousness. And physics will tell you that that energy exists in a particle or a wave. It's a wave that has infinite possibilities until it's observed by consciousness, until it's observed. When it's observed, it collapses to a single point. And so all of our reality is literally co-created by ourselves because our consciousness isn't interacting with energy. That's what reality is. It's the masculine and the feminine constantly interacting with each other and constantly co-creating the universe we live in. And so Tantra and Kabbalah, by the way, because Kabbalah says the same thing when you read the text, talks about the masculine and the feminine, maybe not the Kabbalah 1, 2, 3 stuff, but the deeper Kabbalah stuff talks about it, that we are constantly co-creating the universe through the interaction of the masculine and the feminine that exist in each and every one of us.
Let's talk about that a moment. The masculine and feminine exist inside of each and every one of us. I sometimes struggle with that. Because what feels true to me is that I'm fully feminine and I have fierce feminine inside of me. Maybe it's just terminology and a way of viewing it, but I have a fierce feminine that other people would say, oh, that's masculine. I guess where I see myself is in, because I'm an entrepreneur, a female founder, and I want to always be, I feel always be in my feminine. I want to build my organization within feminine energy. And so when at times that, I've found that the distinction of feminine and masculine inside of each and every one of us has been used to shame. You're too much in your masculine. And I'm like, I'm not fucking in my masculine. I'm still feminine right now. Like, this is still me. And so it's, I get a little conflicted from a polarity perspective. And I've studied the work of Dr. Pat Allen and Kabbalah. And so I get there's a balance in us. And I do believe men have feelings and cry, and that can be viewed as feminine, but I also see that they can still be masculine in their showing of their feelings.
I also have an issue with those words. Well, because words, you can think about it in different ways. You can think about it as yin and yang, like the way the Taoists do, or just different type of polarity. It happens to be used as masculine and feminine, but because in our society we have other attachments to what those words mean, and based on our own personal upbringing, we might be triggered by those words. So if those words don't work for you, use different words. But the bottom line is that there are these two forces. In Kabbalah, it's the desire to receive and the desire to share. It's the same thing. What Kabbalah calls desire to share, it's emissive. It's an emissive quality, a quality that gives out. That's the masculine. The masculine puts out, even sexually. The masculine emits its sexual energy, sperm, right? And the feminine is the receptive energy, desire to receive, right? It has the vessel. Kabbalah calls it light and vessel, right? The vessel receives. Just like the woman has a womb, it's a vessel that receives. Now, each and every one of us has qualities that are receptive and qualities that are emissive. Mm-hmm. Just like you said, the term that you want is desire to receive in order to share, right? That's you. That's the Kabbalah language for uniting the masculine and the feminine. So if the language isn't working for you, the language isn't working for you. That doesn't take away from the fact that you do have these two forces inside of you.
Okay. I like this reframe. And then polarity, it's even something too that I think of in the organization of WeDeepen, of how do we take the feminine and masculine and acknowledge that within our own workplaces. Right now, my team of 4, 3 of them are men who happen to have mostly masculine tendencies. I guess that can be used like I have more feminine tendencies, and someone can have more masculine tendencies, and it can even, whether that's, this isn't gender distinguished, it can be anybody can dance within that. So yeah, I think that's a great reframe right there.
Yeah, and so that's the thing. So it's more about like finding whatever way it works for you, but it's about balancing of these two energies inside of you and using them both. You know, the fact that you want to do a podcast and you're finding words for things, that's a very masculine approach. Words are masculine.
Words are masculine?
Yeah.
Why?
Because anything that creates boundaries are masculine, freedom is feminine. And words create boundaries. That means every word has a definition, and I'm using a particular set of words to convey a concept. That conceptualization, the organization, all those things are masculine. Feminine is free. The feminine can't really be expressed through words. It's an experience. So when you have like a feeling, an experience, a sense in your body, that's feminine. As soon as you need to start explaining it, you're using the masculine.
I really appreciate also too at Unleash when you talked about boundaries and you referenced that I think like walls and gates, and inside of that you have the ability to be free. There was a beautiful way you articulated that.
Yeah, I give it like a simple metaphor there. Like if you are told that you can dance on top of this super tall cliff, it's like just a cliff on all sides, this giant like block of earth, and you can dance and use all the space, you will never get anywhere near the edge because you'll be afraid you're going to fall. But if you put a boundary around the edges, then you will use all the space. So freedom can only exist with safety. The safety is the masculine, the freedom is the feminine. And if you think about it, if you have a lot of energy and you have a lot of ideas and a lot of like vision of what you want to create, but you don't put boundaries over it, it's just going to spread everywhere. It's going to be very chaotic. But when you start putting it through a structure and saying, I'm going to focus on this one thing, that is a masculine quality. Focus is masculine. It's instead of taking, just a light that shines everywhere, it's taking that light and now concentrating it into one place. It becomes a laser and it penetrates. But if you have just the masculine without the feminine, you have just the boundaries without the energy. So there's nothing coming out of that laser. If you have just the feminine without the masculine, you have a nice soft light going in every direction. But if you take them both together, then you concentrate the feminine through the masculine, and that's how you carve with that laser into the world, whatever it is you want to create.
So it is the goal that inside of each of us to have a complete balance of masculine and feminine, because, as holding the vision for WeDeepen, can be chaotic and big, and like we want the award show to recognize the facilitators, and it's going to be the next Grammys or Emmys, and then we're building what Audible is for audiobooks for transformational experiences. I look at this whole new universe that I have this vision of, and then partners team comes in and they help to focus me. I have that focus too of one task at a time, but when they come in and they help me create the structures, that interconnectedness of working together, I then can move much more free and focus, because I have their energy focusing me. So I need other people. And so there's this idea of like, oh, be complete on your own. But also I feel incomplete when I'm by myself.
And that's where self-awareness comes into place. It's just to be aware of what are my most natural traits and qualities, the things that I can do that come effortlessly to me. And then where are things that aren't my strengths, but you know what? I don't even want to do them, and I can just have someone else do it. So that's where the mindset comes in. If you believe that you must work hard to everything, then you're going to constantly try and do everything yourself. If you believe that life isn't about effort and force, and life is about flow, then you will find other people that will complement what you do and let them do that stuff. And so you found you have a certain level of self-awareness that says, this is my zone of genius. I am going to bring aboard other people who can help me with focus and structure and things that I don't want to do, but I know that are necessary. So no, you don't have to do everything within yourself. It's knowing about is having the awareness of yourself so that you can complement it however you want. But even by choosing to bring in these other people, you are creating your reality.
So you study, you practice, and you coach Tantra.
No, actually. I did study Tantra, and I have practiced Tantra, and I do coach with Tantra, but the reason I say no on top of all of that is because that's not how I define myself. I did not leave being a Kabbalist to become a Tantric.
Okay. So,
I saw very quickly on that path how I could have a tendency of now leaving one cult and joining another cult. And there's so many cults within the Tantric world as well, and a lot of corruption. And so I didn't want to do that. But what I realized is that there is wisdom available everywhere. And so I'm a constant student of life, and I do study Tantric principles, and I do study from other places as well. There's a lot of things I love about Tantra, and I do feel it has the potential to be all-inclusive in a lot of ways. And there are things that it just doesn't touch on, and we're constantly evolving in the society. And so I think for a long time I thought, this is the way to learn about sexuality and spirituality through Tantra. And as I've developed, I've looked into the BDSM world, and I'm like, wow, they have so much to teach about the overlap of spirituality and sexuality as well. And that's something that's relatively modern compared to Tantra, which is thousands of years old. You can learn from everything when you pay attention. And this is where it comes back to what you said about Tantra, the presence. There is a concept in Tantra called Samyama, which means you sit down with something, you focus on it, you meditate on it, you merge with it. And when you merge with it, you have a good sense of what parts resonate and fit and what parts don't. And whatever fits, you keep, and whatever doesn't, you let go of. And if you practice that tantric principle of Samyama, you can learn from everything and anyone. And when I went and I learned that concept, my teacher said, as long as you're studying Tantra, you can use Samyama to incorporate anything. And right away I was like, I'm using Samyama on Tantra. I'm not wholeheartedly accepting it. I like this concept, and I'm going to use it. And what fits for me from the Tantra world will stay, and what doesn't, I will release. I've seen a lot of people force themselves into what they think Tantra is supposed to look like, and it causes them suffering. Just like with Kabbalah, just like with any path. So I'm not a Tantric coach. I'm not a coach.
You're not a coach at all, period?
I use coaching practices. I teach other coaches. I have a certification that says that I'm certified to coach. I'm not a coach. I'm not a tantrika. I'm not a Kabbalist.
What are you?
That's what I'm figuring out every day, but I know what I'm not. And that's how we discover ourselves. By slowly chipping away everything that we're not, we become closer to figuring out who we truly are.
What I have thought about since our meeting at Unleash, you had mentioned that you and Natalie, how your origin story of how you met, and there was a, hey, let's practice Tantra. And I have been thinking, because, the idea of dating sounds very heavy. It's like, I just don't, my business is in dating, or had started and began as a dating experience. And I, worked a lot with the dating apps, and I've consulted dating apps, and I know the matchmaking world or industry very well too. And there's always some type of like distaste, and especially, with now that people are swiping, endlessly, and the idea of, because I've also had periods of time in my 30s with having a desire to have, a significant relationship of how do I navigate sex. Because I had like a year and a half without having sex, and it wasn't like a declared celibacy. I wasn't saying it, just it happened. And then I was like, fuck, like where I need to feel like that connection, that penetration. And so, but in relationship, it's like I'm going out and you're dating to find this one person. And then in that you miss, sexual connection, because it's also has been preached to women too, that if you want a significant long-term relationship, withhold sex. And that didn't, I played that for a little bit, but that didn't really work for me. It's just always, there's always this like, kind of like the brain is always thinking in those situations, like, when can I go for it? When can I not go for it? When's the right timing? When's not the right timing? So going in, and I started to think of like, well, what if stop thinking of dating as dating and instead like thinking of it as creating Tantra practices with human beings that you're attracted to?
Well, what is it that you want? What is it that you truly want to have right now in your life? It doesn't have to be a forever thing. What is the most present desire for you right now?
Are you asking me?
Yeah.
Present desire, is deepens continued growth, my continued growth. And
No. Specifically around the issue of sex and relationships.
I would like to be in a connection where I can have consistent sex. I have a high sex drive, but it only happens once I'm opened and I'm beginning sexual connection with somebody. And then I just want sex a lot, in those. But like I want it with one person who I get to deepen with and continue to know. And I do long for a relationship. I can't jump into it and be like, oh, we're going to be together for forever and da-da-da-da. But something that I can grow to trust and feel secure in my connections.
So what I'm hearing is, and correct me if I'm wrong, that what's the most present desire for you right now is to find one partner that you can explore sexually with, that you can deepen that sexual connection, that you can also have some type of relationship where you get to know each other, and there could be a possibility of it being your partner, but you're not attached to it having to be with that person. So far, so good?
So far, so good. But if I have the inkling that that person may not be my partner or is not my partner, then I'm no longer interested.
Great. And when will you know that?
When I'm 80? No, I'm just kidding. Like once we get through it, but like day by day by day, it's kind of a moment by moment until some bigger commitment has been made to one another, which would be interested in doing.
Great. So we used the tool earlier today that you can use this. Which tool is that?
The RDBSM.
RDBSM. So your RDBSM might sound something like this. You go out on a date, you feel there's a spark, you like someone, you say, hey, I'm feeling something here. I want to express my desires with you. Do you mind doing something that might seem a little bit weird, but I found it's been like a really powerful tool to help us make sure we're on the same page. Are you open to that? And then the person will say, probably yes, yeah? And then you can say, okay, so right now I'm single. That's the R.
Currently single. I don't like to have an I am statement of I am single.
Okay. Yes. I'm currently signal or whatever you want to use. I'm not in a relationship. Mm-hmm. My boundaries are that, I'll start with desires in this case. My desire is to have an ongoing connection with someone where we get to deepen and get to know each other better, and also get to practice all kinds of sexual things. I am a very sexual person. I have a lot of sexual desires, and I want to connect in all kinds of those ways. My boundary is that if I stop losing connection, I just want out of it. And
I love that. Okay. Yes.
Right.
Yes. Uh-huh.
You're just literally speaking out what it is.
Yeah. You're giving me words for things that I feel.
Mm-hmm. If I'm stopping the connection, I want out of it, and I want to be honored and respected for that choice, and not if your desire is whatever to not have connection anymore, or whatever it is, or just move to friendship, or whatever it is that your thing is, and sexual health, whatever it is, you got to share that as well. And what this means to me is this is a curious exploration for me. It's an opportunity for me to learn more about myself, and that's the main reason that I'm doing it.
And maybe even to share in my desires, and I do desire to create a family, and have that, and do that with somebody. So if I realize that this is not going to be possible with you, that will also be part of my boundaries that I will exit out of. And then in the meaning or the aftercare too, I think it's good to discuss social media, and how we remain in connection with one another, because I've seen how that can be challenging for couples. And I did have one of the last relationships, I did this TV show X-Rated, and the last guy on the show, he, at one point unfriended me and unfollowed me. And I remember when I noticed that one day, I was like, ugh, it just hurt my heart, because I didn't, it's like, then you can see somebody connecting with other people that you're friends with too, and you're like, but you just cut me out. And then he refriended me and re-added me, and then after the show cut me out again. So I just, to talk through some of those things ahead of time of how people, because, it's, he gets to take care of his own heart too, in his own way. That's
right. That's why you encourage the other person to do it as well. And you see if you can honor each other's needs. And if the person can be a person that can honor your it's over when it's over, or can be open to, because you said maybe it's a relationship. And at a certain point, if I feel a connection, I might say, I'm open to a relationship. And if you are too, I'd explore that. But you got to honor the fact that you might say that and the person might say, no, this is where I want to keep it. So if you're both on the same page and willing to honor each other's choices along the way, and you communicate that ahead of time, then you set yourself up for more success. It doesn't guarantee that there's not going to be hurt feelings along the way. It doesn't guarantee that the person will honor the boundaries. But if they do not honor it, it's not on you, because you've done your part of communicating it. And that means you don't have to walk away with guilt or shame or regret about the experience, because you did everything on your part.
Mm. Okay, cool. I think I'm definitely gonna practice this. So you coach coaches. You train coaches, because like you said, you're not a coach.
I do use coaching skills with people.
You do use coaching skills with
people. But just like you don't like your I am statements, neither do I. So I'm not a coach. I happen to have the coaching certification, and I use coaching skills with clients. But I don't like to define myself as a coach. Yeah.
I heard, Yadi Iksa is one of my best friends from Unleash, and I know she's going to take Sonia Sophia's tapping course, which I'm definitely interested in taking myself. But it's so cool to always witness Yadi just upping to the next level and increasing her toolbox or her skill set. And you had mentioned to her too that your coaching program, you had shared it with her. And at that time I was like, ooh, I'm curious. Like, what is this program? Like, what do you do?
So, one of my gigs that I do is I was certified as a coach through a program called IPEC. They're one of the biggest coaching certifications in the world, quite unique and valuable in what they do. And eventually, I also got hired to be one of their lead trainers, so I train their coaches as well. So it's definitely the coaching certification program that I would recommend to someone who does want to learn that skill set. It gives you a powerful framework for how you ask your questions, how you listen, and what tools you use to get out of the way and allow the other person to make powerful decisions for themselves. So you're not a helper or a savior. You are a facilitator for the other person's own growth through themselves.
I feel like that would be a good program for me, or for anyone building an organization or wants to be of help for, I feel like everyone should take that program so we can all be supporting each other and coaching each other to be, not coaching each other, that's not even the right term, but supporting each other to be their own individual, unique self.
Yeah, I do. I train, I'm about to go into a weekend and train coaches from all around the world, and I train them regularly, and I see people go through the program, and I see them create a change in their own lives. That's what happened for me, and first and foremost, and then I see them go out and help other people. It is one of the most valuable coaching programs I've seen for people who are interested to go down that path. Yeah.
What and can you tell me, like, if I was to sign up and because I'm interested, when's the registration? What's the process? How long is it?
That's totally not my department. You just go to ipeccoaching.com. I know that they start cohorts 3 times a year. So the next one is going to, what month are we in? September? The next one's going to be in November. The next cohort starts. So you just go to ipeccoaching.com and you can tell them I sent you. And you'll speak to an admissions coach and they'll give you all that information. And it is a very powerful program.
Cool. Thank you so much. This is so fun to share you and have this conversation with you and to deepen with you. Before we wrap, is there anything else that's on your mind that you want to share? Did you make any meaning of this episode?
Yeah, I had a lot of fun. I had a lot of fun in this podcast. And this is something that I've been thinking about often. There was this, not exactly a meme, but it's a snippet from a book with Big Panda and Little Dragon. You might have seen those floating around Instagram. And there's this one bit where Little Dragon turns to Big Panda and asks, what's more important, the destination or the journey? And Big Panda responds, the company. And so for me, that's the biggest meaning of what this is all about. I enjoyed spending time with you, getting to know you, being in your company. This is part of the journey. I don't know what kind of destinations it will lead to, but I enjoyed the moments.
Me too. We get to work together, working together. This is like, my most, at this stage in my life, like I'm not so much interested in making new friends, although you feel like an instant friend. I'm most interested in collaborating and creating together. I think as you speak about where, Tantric and the web and the interconnectedness, and we come from this creation of sexual energy. And so what gets to be created from this connection? I'm so curious. And I love that of the company because, yeah, it's surrounding myself with some of the most interesting, and I'm going to use the word powerful, but I'm going to use the reason I say the word powerful is because the way that you lead and guide without telling somebody exactly what to do is really powerful, and giving us these tools, these suggestions, these values to try out and see if they work for us. If you're listening to this podcast and you are taking in this idea of RDBSM, I'd be curious to hear how it works for you. I'm going to try it out, and I would love to hear if you try it out as well, or anything else that you heard. Also, when I am sharing and speaking on this podcast, I'm always trying to figure everything out with you. And anything that I say, it's, I don't own the truth. I'm just in discovery. So I might speak something in one episode and then a future episode completely change my mind and be a different person. So don't ever hold me to anything in one particular moment. I don't know why that's coming through for me to say right now and share with you all. Yossef, anything else that you want to share about maybe where people can find you or connect with you as well?
If you spell my name right, you'll find me everywhere because I'm the only one of me. Yossef Sagi, it's Yossef, last name Sagi. So Yossef Sagi on Instagram, yossefsagi.com. Yeah, you'll find me everywhere.
What do you want people to find you for?
You'll find me if you feel drawn in this conversation and there's something that I said that resonated with you, and then you're going to either look at my Instagram or look at my website, and you are going to either feel a connection or not. I try and be in the world without a mask. And if you feel a connection, then you will know why you feel that connection, and then you'll contact me, and then we'll discover together if we're meant to work together.
I love it. I love it. Well, thank you all for listening to another episode of Deepen with Christina. Go to WeDeepen.com, check out the schedule. I hope to create experiences that Yossef is at, and you get to meet him in person and meet me as well. That's what this is about, building community, or communities of communities, societies, Thank you all for tuning in. Again, you know where to find me. Instagram at Christina Weber. Send me a message. And also if you go to WeDeepen.com, at the top of the announcement bar, there's a phone number, and you can text that phone number, count me in, and then you can become a part of our SMS list as well, where we send out invitations. Thank you all. And until next time, I love you. Bye.